Hi guys, I'm Brooke, and for my oral report, I decided to do the article Reducing Intergroup Prejudice and Conflict Using the Media, a Field Experiment in Rwanda. So I chose this article because of the huge impact that media has in our lives every day. I mean, with social media, Facebook, Twitter, all that, and then with CNN and Fox News, every part of our lives are basically controlled by the media in all different forms, and they influence us a lot more than we might realize. So the question that this person in this experiment brought up was, what interventions have been shown to reduce prejudice and conflict in real-world settings? So far, there haven't been very many interventions and ways to do this. So that was the main goal of this whole study, basically. So the setting of this study was in Rwanda, and in Rwanda, this country, they had mass genocide between the Hutus and Tutsis, and radio played a key role in influencing people. This experiment tested three main questions, and they were: can mass media affect personal beliefs, can it affect perceptions of social norms, and can it affect behavior? Every year, the government spends millions and millions on anti-prejudice PSAs throughout all countries, so it's a valid question for just about everybody. So far, they realize that social norms have very significant effects on prejudice and conflict, so media uses those social norms to their advantage and tries to change social norms in order to change people and their behaviors. So radio in Rwanda, it's the most important form of mass media, and like I said before, it's basically the Hutus and the Tutsis just separated, and they use the radio like one group will say, like the Hutus might have anti-Tutsi jokes on their radio shows, and vice versa. Just framing a narrative to get people to not like each other, both groups. But basically, there was this new soap opera called New Dawn, and it addresses mistrust, lack of communication and interaction, and trauma from the genocide. And the messages are aimed at the roots of the prejudice. So they want to get to what causes the prejudice, and they want to get there, reach the prejudice before the prejudice can really bloom and blossom. So their main goal is changing social norms with this soap opera, and with mistrust, lack of communication and interaction, and trauma from genocide, it's something that the people in the country can really relate to. So the experimenter had 4 hypotheses. The first one was that the program will change listeners' beliefs. The second is that it will change perceptions of how Rwandans should behave in situations of prejudice and conflict. And then the third is that people will be willing to speak about sensitive topics and cooperate with each other, both groups, the Hutus and the Tutsis. And then the fourth is the emotional and empathetic reactions to radio characters will change. So the people will have these emotional and empathetic reactions to these characters and relate to them, and that will change their view on prejudice and conflict. So the method, this person they sampled listeners and communities. So they used group randomized type of sampling. So they gave, so the groups, they were given either the radio program that is trying to shape social norms and change prejudice, or they were given the other soap opera about health, which was the control. So there are 8 general population communities from 4 different regions, and then so each community that was similar to a different one, they were just matched together, and one of them would have the radio show about trying to change social norms and prejudice, and the other one would have the control. So they're basically 4 groups. So 8 groups or 8 communities, and then 4 different partners. Yeah. There would be 40. There was 40 adults, and then it balanced sex, age, and family. So they're all those parameters are about equal. Each person took a pretest. So the pretest was demographic questions, and it about listening habits, and then the experiences they had throughout the genocide. So if their family members were killed, if they were let's say, in a situation where they were being hurt and bystanders didn't help them, or just, any experiences they have with the genocide that might change their opinions of prejudice or their social norms. So the procedure for 1 whole year, each community, they were visited by research assistants, and they would listen to 4 20-minute episodes each month. So one group would listen to 4 20-minute episodes of the new soap opera that was aiming to change the prejudice, and then the other one, that were partners, the other one would listen to the radio show about health. And then basically it was when they listen to the radio shows, they always listen in groups. It's just what they do in Rwanda. It's kind of a tradition because most people don't own radios. They would listen in a casual community gathering with snacks, drinks, and they listen and they discuss. And then research assistants would kind of sit in the back and just observe, and they'd fill out observation sheets, and they would write their observations on group enthusiasm, confusion, emotions, and then the discussions that they had about the program themes. So with data collection, after 1 year, they conducted individual interviews for all these people. And basically, for the individual interviews, they would read off questions and then the interviewee would answer if they agree or disagree. So they would ask questions like, would you be prejudiced, or do you think that this group is less than this group? Asking if they would be if they're prejudiced against a certain group still. And then they would say agree, disagree, and if they agreed or disagreed on interracial or intergroup marriage, agree, disagree. And then there would be a behavioral observation, and they'd basically just watch how they behaved in a situation where if the groups could work together, if they, for example, they did this thing where basically the groups had to share batteries, and they would see how well they worked together to share the batteries and continue listening to the radio. They also did focus groups, so they would split up the men and women and then for example, they would ask the men and women if they believed in intergroup marriage and if they opposed it or agreed with it, and then if they think it's right to basically set limitations on intergroup marriage. And then for results, they found that the radio program didn't change personal beliefs, but they did influence perceptions of social norms. So even though they aimed at changing personal beliefs, sometimes people's egos get in the way, and sometimes what somebody believes, they believe. They're not going to let you change their mind. And it's very difficult to change somebody's personal beliefs when egos get in the way. But social norms and their perceptions of social norms can change. People are very aware of what others think, and if everybody thinks one thing, then they're more likely to think the same thing, or at least show that they think the same thing. So some people, they would endorse norms opposite of personal beliefs. So maybe they don't believe in intergroup marriage or interracial marriage, for example, in society in America, but they would say that they don't believe that we should set restrictions on intergroup marriage or interracial marriage. So, in conclusion, to change prejudice behavior, people should target social norms rather than personal beliefs. Social norms, people are so concerned with what other people do and what other people think. Even today, being racist is not a social norm. It's a social norm to not be racist. So people, even though they might have racist prejudice in their minds when they see a white or black person or of whatever race, they may not act on it because of social norms. And they don't, there's taboos, and people don't want to cross the line with their people and upset everybody and be the spotlight of attention, for one. Discussion and emotional reactions are necessary for change, they found in this experiment. So when people can relate to the characters in the radio and have emotional reactions, that's when the most change happened. So a lot of the people could relate to the problems that the radio soap opera people had in the genocide in their radio show. So they were more likely to relate to those people and see that, even though we're Hutus and we're Tutsis, we both have very similar problems in this genocide, and we can kind of relate and work through things together. So in conclusion, like, the media, they have noticed these things, and so they target social norms. The media doesn't tell people what to think, but they communicate social norms so that everybody ends up maybe not necessarily thinking the same things, but acting in the same way. So that's the best way to influence somebody to prevent prejudice, or even to incite prejudice. If some media's goal is to incite prejudice, they might target social norm, or try to say that a social norm is to be a prejudice. But in this particular situation, they're trying to get people to not be prejudiced, so they want to push the narrative that social norm is to not be prejudiced. So hopefully, like, that will cut off the root of prejudice even from a young age, so that people in result will not be prejudiced in the end. Oh.